Hey, welcome to Transform Your Workplace. It's your host, Brandon Laws. This episode is brought to you by Xenium HR. And for a limited time now, you can sign up for the annual What People Want from Work survey. This is our 6th year doing this survey. It's a great opportunity for organizations, small, medium-sized organizations, nonprofits, for-profit, to ask their employees what they want out of their workplace. We tackle topics like company leadership, compensation, benefits and perks, workplace environment, diversity, equity, inclusion, and so much more. It's free to participate. Xenium does all the analysis, and at the end of it, we give you a nice report with all the details about what your people want to work. Learn more and sign up. The link is in the show notes. All right, I'm excited for today's episode. It's with Anthony Vaughan. What I loved about him and having him on the show is he was so candid and spoke from his heart. And I think that's all we can ask for in some of the guests that we have on here. Anthony is the co-founder of the E1B2 Collective. He's a podcast host himself and really enjoyed the conversation. We talked about his career, was very successful as a business leader, kind of lost all of it though, and struggled along the way. And I think he came to realize that people leadership is such a huge component to running a successful organization. So he shifted his career to that of people leadership and HR and just has a completely different perspective. And you're going to hear about his transformation and why he focuses so much on retention as part of business success. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, any of those places. I would love to hear from you. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next week. We've got a great episode coming next week with Adrian Gostick. He's the author of Anxiety at Work and so many other books, but he is a returning guest and you're going to love that one too. So make sure to hit that subscribe button so you get that episode when it comes out next week. Take care. Anthony, it's a pleasure to have you on Transform Your Workplace. Thanks for coming on the show.
I appreciate it. How are you?
I am so good. We've been kind of circling for a while, and I'm glad we could finally do this podcast and connect. You've got your own podcast too, so we're in the same space as far as HR podcasting. So let's start with, how did you get to where you are? I know a little bit about your background. You were a business leader, a business owner, running a 7-figure business, and now you're an HR professional. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so it's kind of come full circle because I'm an entrepreneur again now, which is interesting too. But yeah, so long story. Well, actually, let me back up here. Let's give a shout out. I think the both of us should give a shout out to Galen Emanuel for the
I love Galen.
That's how this all actually happened. So thank you. He's a dear friend. I've collaborated with his brand a couple of different times, and so he's a good guy. So thanks a lot.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, so I started a company very early in my career. So I spent some time at a D3 university called Wesley my freshman year. Did a transfer over to West Virginia to play football, and also, frankly, to just be with a girl at the time, honestly. And it was a good party school if you guys have heard of it. Long story short, man, personal circumstance happened. Came home, and I'll speed the story up this way. 18 months later, I was looking at like you said, a 7-figure brand, 60 full-time folks, another 25 in collaborators.
Incredible.
And subcontractors. And the biggest thing that was kind of neat is partnership with the Under Armour. They really allowed us to do a lot of great things and have a lot of great exposure. And so inevitably, long story short, I was running a company at 19, 20 years old.
That's so young.
Yeah.
I mean, that's to be running a business of that size at 19, 20 years old. I mean, that's incredible.
You have no business doing so either, as you probably know.
At 19, I was a child, I think, at least mentally.
You know what's funny? I was a child as well. But long story short, that's what happened. And I was able to slowly but surely chip away at a lot of really thoughtful partnerships, build that brand, scale that brand. And then I guess I can pause there because I made a really big mistake, but I'll do a little cliffhanger. knowing the podcasting game, I'll do a little cliffhanger and allow you to maybe ask some other questions. But essentially, again, 19 till about 21 was that beginning career of being a business owner and a leader and working with Under Armour and a lot of great athletes at the time.
Yeah. So during that time, that 2-year span where you've essentially grown this organization, what struggles came, because you're not doing it anymore. So what struggles did you have during that 2-year span that was sort of a gut check to you in your early career?
So I'll throw out a couple buzzwords. I didn't know what an IDP was, individual development plans. I wasn't aware of the word called leadership. I wasn't aware of the word called career mapping and how to go about that. And so let's stick on those three things here. I had a great guy who is doing a lot of great work with the NFL now and still actually collaborates with Under Armour. He was a budding sports and agility coach. So there, in the football space, there's a lot of agility coaches that help you work on your footwork and other things. And long story short, I sought him out and I said, look, I want you to be a partner in this brand. Now, when I used the word partner at the time, I looked at the word partner a lot different than what he thought inevitably. Did not give him equity, but I wanted to start this off with him. And I knew through him, I could get to Under Armour and I could get to a large quantity of athletes. And long story short, brought him into the fold. We made a lot of money together, did a lot of great work together. And I apologize if you guys heard my cat here in the background.
That's okay. I got a couple cats roaming around too.
Yeah. And long story short, the mistake that I made connecting it to career mapping, IDP, all those right things, he sat me down one afternoon and said, look, man, my mom's giving me a lot of crap here. Because we were all young, he was 21, 22 at the time as well. So he was saying, look, she is seeing us do a lot of great work, but she's been asking a really clear question. Where's this all going? She knows this is something, but how is this connected to my long-term career aspirations? What inevitably, am I going to be doing? And I didn't have a great answer for him. And frankly, I ignored the conversations. I ignored the meetings. He tried to do about 4. And long story short, he sent me an email about 2.5 weeks later after trying to get my attention for 6 straight weeks and said, I'm going to move on from this company. And he took Under Armour with him.
Yeah, your biggest client. Okay.
Yep. Took Under Armour. He took 99.9% of every single athlete that was associated with the brand, and he opened up shop and took a lot of my other executives and coaches that were involved as well. And so it taught me a very clear lesson, very young at age, that really all he wanted, Brandon, was a career mapping conversation, a thoughtful one-on-one, an individual development plan, if you will, of what he could do to continue to grow and to prosper within this organization, contextual to his overall skill set. And he wanted to know where the hell he was going. And I was not privy to that, being a kid myself. And that ended the business shortly thereafter.
When you started that business and really started getting into it, obviously you got a glimpse of what your weaknesses were as a business leader, and it seems like the people development side. But what strengths did you have that led you to where you were at the time?
Grit, I think. I come from West Baltimore, really humble beginnings. I'm not supposed to be here. I have a lot of friends, unfortunately, not to bring any darkness to this podcast, but have passed away, addicted to drugs. Parents to this day are not doing too well financially, though they try their hardest. Yeah, the alternative looks like, a bartender at a local bar. Though I will say, because my mom tells me this, there's nothing wrong with being a bartender. Please let me be on the record there, because I don't want to get any hate. But for me, I wanted to do a little bit more, is what I'm saying. And so I think what enabled me to do that is grit, right? My options not running a company were not like that great. So I figured, why not? That was associated with grit. I think partnership design was another skill that I had that actually led me to my second business. I ran a partnership consultancy firm for a couple of years after that company. I think partnership design for early stage startups and late stage startups, which I was, is really interesting. I learned that pretty quickly for some reason. I think the ability to galvanize relationships really quickly and put teams together without giving them $1 up front and getting them excited about the vision.
Yeah, it sounds like influencing people is a strength of yours.
Exactly. That's actually a great way to just sum it up. So yeah, those are skills that I cultivated over time, and it came pretty naturally.
Yeah, so it sounds like true entrepreneur, but when your key employee left and really all you wanted was career mapping, was that the moment you realized, like, I need to figure out how to be a people leader, or did it come years later as you maybe dove into some of the subject matter?
No, that was the literal moment. The literal moment, I'll tell you exactly to the T of what happened. That day occurred. I left the office. I had a meeting with my COO at the time, Tim. He looked at me and said, because he was much older, he said, you got two choices, kid. You can pick up the pieces and try to rebuild this, or you can go start something new and dedicate the next few years to learning and growing, because I think you made a couple mistakes here. And he said, frankly, that I wish I would have guided you away from making those mistakes, as I made those mistakes early in my career as well. So he took a little accountability as well. And I decided to go with the latter. I decided to go with research, study. So I took a trip to New York, took my now fiance out to New York to just have some downtime. And when I came back, I said, I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life studying every single day to understand the mistakes that I made. And career mapping, IDP, and strategic employee. One of those were like some of the first things that popped up as I was Google searching, trying to figure out the mistakes that I made. And I just started going down the rabbit hole of studying every day to never make those mistakes again.
Were there any sort of formal education or certifications that you went through, and what areas did you really start researching and studying?
No formal.
Okay.
I suffer from severe ADD, so I was never the greatest.
Sitting in class. Like, could you imagine, like, nowadays people are sitting on a computer doing virtual work? Like, I could not do that.
It's the worst thing. You know, it's funny. My fiance, she just stopped. With the last 3 years, she's been a teacher. So I've got to see it firsthand, kind of the trials and tribulations with that. So no, nothing formal. Again, I studied. And when I say literal 3 hours a day, Brandon, I really mean that. I replaced my athletic background of like exercise and training for 3 hours a day, and I plugged research in. So I'm talking white papers, case studies, mentors, thought leaders. I built out a really deep network around me and said, talk to me for an hour a week. And I had like 6 folks. So I was doing 6 hours of calls. Again, things that I was looking into: career mapping, executive coaching. Then I got into EQ pretty hard. Then I got down the rabbit hole of neuroscience with like Christine Comerford and David Rock and Keith Ferrazzi. Then I jumped over and actually stumbled upon Gary Vee very early.
Yeah, love Gary Vee.
About maybe 7 years ago. And he was talking about people and strategy and how that could really impact the org. And then got into, organizational psychology and all of that good stuff with Adam Grant. And so I just started going down these rabbit holes, and inevitably, and I'm sure you're going to ask this, but inevitably in the midst of me still running my second business, I was doing that under, behind the scenes, kind of like night school, if you will. And I did that for 5 years straight. And I picked my head up and I said, I want to jump into an organization and learn how to do this tactically and not just be a researcher and a thought leader around it. I want to actually know how to do it. And I had a big tab in my Google Docs. It was called E1B2, Employees First, Business Second, because that's what I summed up my mistake being. And I'll leave it there. But pretty much I decided to go into a couple companies and pitch my services.
So were you consulting with those organizations, or were you going in as an employee?
I tried to be ahead of people.
Well, you tried. Did you succeed?
I succeeded. Yeah.
Excellent.
99.9% of the company said, are you crazy, kid? What do you like? You don't have any HR in your background.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because when I've talked to several people on my podcast, as I'm sure you have, business owners, C-level executives, they are looking for people officers, chief people officers, CHROs that have a level of business experience and maybe some HR, but people leadership skills. So it's like that perfect combo. And I don't know if a lifelong HR practitioner is going to really fit that role unless they learn the business side. Is that your experience as well?
That was my experience, right? Because what I did is the reason why I got their attention is I said, look, I've built a 7-figure and a 6-figure brand before 26. And so that popped their head up, right? Because I knew sales and marketing and partnerships. So I knew to say something really impactful to get their attention. And so they were like, okay, that's interesting. Let's talk.
I understand business.
Yeah, exactly. First, right? And then I told them about the mistake that I made. And then I said, I've dedicated, the last, 5 years of research to getting better at these things. And I showed them all the documents and the tools and the best practices and all the information that I had. And so a couple companies gave me a shot, one in a strategic advising capacity, kind of like a fractional model, and then the other in a full scope of being ahead of people. And I said to them, here's the big thing, Brandon. I said, I don't know anything traditional in the HR world. So you need to have a generalist and you need to have a recruiter in-house.
Beautiful.
I want to have ownership of all things, executives, managers, people. And I want to be at the strategic seat from day one. And I want to galvanize what should be happening on behalf of our people and putting their perspectives and the data of their perspectives first to guide our strategy.
That is beautiful.
And I'll be honest with you, I was just regurgitating everything I researched, but I wanted to get in there and actually try it, and they gave me a shot.
Yeah. I want to go back to the research part because you said something that we were talking about the fact that you have ADD and you didn't really want to sit through formal education. I imagine people listening have a similar feeling. I know I resonate with that. I don't want to go back and get my MBA because I just can't sit through class. I don't want to do night school, whatever it may be. There's a lot of great resources out there, whether it's even certifications or just online education or books. I mean, if you were talking to yourself at that age when you started going through this path, or even somebody you can mentor nowadays, what would you tell people, like the best resources, books to pick up, anything that you could share with listeners would be amazing?
I would literally type in, if you're someone that's again, we'll go with some of the themes we've been talking about. If you're interested in individual development plans and the frameworks, if you're interested in internal comms, if you're interested in employer branding, if you're interested in people analytics, I would literally type in those in Google. And then next to that, I would type in case study, or I would type in white paper. Because those are the types of things that you actually want to read, or I would type in framework. And that's what I did. I just did that. And then it showed me really deep tactical structures and processes that I inevitably just took, copied and pasted, and literally just started dreaming up and coming up with my own variations of what I would do differently, how I would approach it, looking at what they did. Because I think blogs are too high level.
Yeah, it's like bullet points and subheaders, and It's not enough. But if you have a framework, you can actually take that and make it your own and actually implement it in an organization.
Exactly. That's what I would do. And then there are some great certifications and some programs. Obviously, we all know about SHRM, and we know about some other great organizations here. And I think those are valuable if you learn best in that type of a structure. But for me, I wanted to just chip away at case studies, white papers. And then also, obviously, I did a really good job of building out a network around me where I had a lot of great people that would sit with me for 60 minutes, 90 minutes, once a month, once a week, to just talk to me about all the things they were doing actively, give me access to be a fly on the wall, quite literally, I'm not even here. I'm just going to sit here and I'm just going to watch you interact with your executives, with your employees. I'm going to watch you conduct strategy and come up with something from scratch, literally them on their own computer. And I'm just kind of there in the background watching them figure things out and talk to themselves and plan things out and have meetings. I just sat there and just listened. So that's what I would recommend.
You were talking just a bit ago about the structure when you were head of people. So I think you said you were working with the leaders and the executives, and I imagine for coaching and development, career mapping, all those things. But then you said underneath you had to have a generalist and somebody else. I'm curious about just the structure and how you distributed the people side of the work.
Yeah.
What resources did you have? What areas did you touch and did not touch? I really want to know from your perspective as a head of people, what you are doing and what the people under you are doing.
So I'll give you a couple examples. For example, if we had to conduct recruiting, right? That's a pretty typical HR responsibility. The tactical, sourcing, going out, the interviews themselves, figuring out what the job description actually, writing the actual job description, really tactical generalist type roles and responsibilities. I did not touch it ever. But what I did, though, is I did oversee those things to make sure that they were equitable, make sure they were fair, make sure they were contextual, make sure the job description was designed in such a way that would really give us the best shot of describing exactly what we are trying to create. got into employer branding and really looked at the messaging and the structure and the copy and the feel. I would create a process connected to recruiting where once we would bring someone into the fold, so now they're an employee, I would be the one conducting those 90-day interviews with the employees and really ask really poignant, interesting questions to really unpack the good, the bad, the ugly, and put them in a spot where they can kind of control the narrative, take that data, bring it back to the hiring managers, bring it back to the other managers and say, here's what we need to do better in the job description. Here's what we could have done better in interview 2. Here's what we could do better in interview 3. Here's where they were still a little bit confused and puzzled. I was very much of a strategist, right? And then even again, on the compliance side and the policy side, I would then again never really designed or built any of those things. I just opened up the hood, if you will, conducted audits, went to my employees first and say, walk me through some of the policies that are still really confusing to you. Walk me through some of the structures and the systems and the workflows that we have that put you in a moment where it makes you not as productive. What can we change? What can we do? What do you need more from your leaders? And then I would go to the leaders and say, and this is actually really important, Brander, I had actual decision-making bandwidth, meaning there were like bullet points that the leaders in the company, every executive outside the CEO, like I would rate them. I would support them around making sure they were being, again, super empathetic, super supportive, being contextual with their communication style to the preferences of the employees, being able to like audit and adjust workflows. And if they were not able to be empathetic and super tactical in those moments with their direct reports, I had the ability to fire them. Quite literally. I would train them, I would support them, I would love them. And then at any given point, I would say, look, our employees are not experiencing this side of management well, and here are the reasons why. We've done X, Y, and Z to support. What else do I need to support you with? Or maybe this is not the right fit. And I don't think that is a structure that most heads of people have. And I want to see more of that, because we have the best skill sets in the org to figure out what's best for the people in the company. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Mm-hmm. Very. What's one of the biggest successes you've had in that chief people officer role?
I created a graduation model. So what I was able to do, since I have a business background, I was able to sit with Kevin and Naya. Kevin was the CEO, Naya was the COO. Naya was really my right-hand man. Me and Naya worked together pretty consistently. We realized, long story short, let me try to sum it up, that most of our employees, about 78%, 80%, had a desire to only be at our company for like 12 to 18 months. We were like a stepping stone to another area.
Weird. How did you determine that? Did you just ask them?
Conversations. Yeah, conversations.
Okay.
And then also like looking at the data and just seeing people leave.
That also like it speaks to your culture though. If people are open about like, yeah, I'm going to be here for 12 to 18 months and then I'm going to leave. So it's like you can help them graduate. Maybe that's where the graduation, I'll let you just
No, you're good. No, those are the right things you're saying. So really where I first started is like, I just kept noticing it. And so I was like, wait, let me go talk to some of the people that walked away. Like, actually tell me, like, where are you going? And they're like, well, we're going to work in this medical space. We're going to work at this job. And I'm like, well, why are you doing that? They're like, because you guys don't have those roles available. And so I was like, okay, hold on, stop there. That's interesting. And so I went to Kevin, I went to Naya. I said, do we need, and I did an audit of the org. I did audit of the org. I said, do we need any of those roles? And objectively, interesting enough, we found out contextual to our goals in the next 2 to 3 years, we actually did not need those roles that were out there in the market. We just didn't need them. We didn't need that capacity at the time. We were also shifting into a nonprofit branding. So then our margins were zero. So our margins were razor thin as well. So folks were leaving for 2 reasons. Folks were leaving because the highest paid person outside of the managers and the executives were $18 an hour. So we then realized that the majority of our staff were in their late 20s heading into their 30s. So now we're realizing, oh, these folks are getting married, trying to have kids, trying to go to the next level in their career. They cannot survive off of 18. But Brandon, we don't even have the cash, even if we wanted to put them in a position to make more than 18. And we don't need there are no needs at the manager and executive levels to even shift them into a different area. So I was like, at a pure business level, we're stuck here. And they were like, well, what do we do? And I said, well, why don't we create a graduation model? They're like, what is that? I said, why don't we make partnerships with the next tier of companies that are similar to us?
Interesting.
Yeah, we did like a learning and development program where I said, look, we'll give them exposure, we'll give them shadowing opportunities, we'll give them X, Y, and Z, and we will graduate them to those companies, but it will need an agreement that they'll be here with us for 18 months, 12 months, whatever the case is. So we would be able to predict that. So we would do our recruiting. We would be able to predict and keep things on schedule and keep things on track. The engagement, Brandon, the engagement of those folks, once they knew they were graduating to a next level, once they knew they had shadowing opportunities, once they knew that we were going to really support them contextually to their aspirations long term and we cared about them, it went through the roof. Innovation spiked. Anything you can think of spiked. All the metrics that we all know and love spiked. And then also natural inbound of recruiting and employer branding spiked. Because now people were starting to find out that, hey, this company will actually help you get to another level. So maybe you should come here. So we were getting higher levels of talent that once it gets to those next levels, because we had a pipeline.
Yeah.
People to this day still reach out to me and say, thank you for doing that. So that's an example.
That's beautiful. At least you owned exactly who you were as an employer. And it's like, okay, there's like a limited amount of time most employers are going to stay here unless they could actually get to the leadership or executive level, which didn't sound like there's a ton of opportunities. So at least you built a program to get people in and train them up and then have them continue their career elsewhere that was a good fit for them. So it's beautiful.
Exactly. I appreciate that.
After that point, where'd your career grow? Like, what are you up to now?
Yeah, so I was furloughed.
If this was like beginning of the pandemic or earlier than that?
The beginning of the pandemic, yep. And so as you probably can imagine, I'm not good at waiting around. I'm not good at hanging out. I'm not good at chilling. I'm not good at doing any of those things. And so what I decided to do is I decided to start the E1B2 Collective. It was a holding company that inevitably created, and we do create lots of different brands, services, and executions in the world of work.
And where the E1B2, where did that come from? Was that early moment in your career where you're like, oh, I was putting business first, not employees first, and now it's flip-flopped for you?
Exactly. I think, well, the E1B2 really came from putting employees first. I think for us, what we care most about is really utilizing employee data, really utilizing their perspectives, their nuances, what makes them them, and putting those things first to guide any business executions that we want to put in place. Yeah, that was the thinking and that was the thought. And then I was inspired to create a holding company, kind of again by Gary Vee. I'm a big fan. I like what he's doing.
Yeah. Gosh, he's got so many brands.
Exactly.
So smart.
And that was the thinking. Exactly.
Yeah. I want to talk about just the current state of being an employer, especially amid the pandemic and a lot of employers are going back to work. But before I do that, can you share like your website or any other places that people should go check out what you're up to now?
100%. I think the easiest space to check me out and to hear about what I'm working on is going to be my LinkedIn. I think if you just, search Anthony Vaughan, VAUGHAN. I think that, the website is the E1B2Collective.com. There's a lot of good stuff. I think if you just Google Anthony Vaughan and then put HR behind it, there's going to be a lot of great information there.
I'll put links to those profiles in the show notes. So if you're listening, or just go back to the show notes and you can click on Anthony's profiles from there. So it's been a weird time the last year and a half or more for some organizations. I mean, you're so close to the employees and the needs of employees. Where do you think they're at right now? What do they need from their employer more than ever right now?
I think they need a couple things. I think they, number one, need their employees to operationalize flexibility.
Yeah.
And empathy. I'll be very candid with you, Brandon. I think a lot of employers have faked the funk a little bit. I think a lot of the DE&I movements we were seeing, a lot of the flexibility and hybrid of work that we were seeing, we're starting to notice that going away with the world opening up here.
Right. I get that. I'm with you. I totally see it.
Yeah, man. And I think what employees are looking for and what employees want is they need their employers to truly operationalize what they're saying. If you're saying that DE&I matters, if you're saying that hybrid work matters, then build that into the literal fabrics of the organization and keep them in here forever, and don't allow them to go up and down based off of the political landscape or the health landscape that's happening. Keep it in there because obviously it's important to folks.
Anthony, what's coming to mind for me is this quote. It's something like, don't let a good crisis go to waste. I feel like a lot of people are not taking what they've learned through the challenges and adversity that this pandemic has given us in our organizations, with our people, just all the challenges that came with it. Did we learn from it? Or are we just trying to go back to business as usual? Because I don't think business as usual would be a smart move right now.
I don't think so either. And no, I don't think we've learned from it. I think human beings are stubborn. I think human beings have significant amounts of ego. And I think the human beings that are leading organizations need to check themselves, if I'm being frank with you. and not to do a shout out to anything that I'm working on, but I think they genuinely need to put employees first. The literal meaning of the E1B2 is not E1. It's not employees first, employees are right forever. It's B2 as well, business. Put their thoughts, put their perspectives, put the data you collect around them, put how they think about the operational fabrics of the organization first, and allow that information to guide what they decide to do. And I just don't think a lot of organizations are doing that. A lot of organizations are making a decision that only behooves their perspectives, AKA the executives' perspectives, and then they're putting it in place and they're updating the employees rather than co-creating.
So besides that, what would you say employers are getting wrong about people leadership in general?
What are they getting wrong besides that? There's a lot. I think, let me do this. I think I have a brand called Beyond Brand, so I'll do a synergy with that. I think a lot of employers are horrible at explaining operational realities of a company early in the process. I believe that's true. What I mean by that is, and I'll keep it very simple in layman's terms, I believe when you are running a company and when you are trying to bring a new applicant into the org, I believe it is incredibly important for you to talk about the operational fabrics and realities of the org seconds after they apply.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because you want that onboarding experience, or that even when they're interviewing and you're telling them how great your culture is or anything about the business, that it matches the reality later on when they actually get in the weeds of doing their job, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And so I think what employers and leaders are doing wrong is they're faking the funk. They're getting too excited about bringing in the employee, because typically, this, getting into the recruiting world, we start the hiring process a little too late. We're rushing around. We needed that role to be filled yesterday. And so they're just trying to expedite as much as they can instead of being super thoughtful and patient.
Well, Anthony, I mean, this has been such a good conversation. I think we're going to have to do another one, because there's probably so much more we could talk about. Anything that you just want to say in parting to the listeners, about anything, really? Last word for you.
Just put employees first. Really understand what that means. Utilize the data. Really take that data, their perspectives around even nitty gritty things like how they're experiencing the workflow, how they're experiencing recruiting, how they're experiencing the employer brand, how they're experiencing managers and their overall personalities and leadership styles. And take their data and really bake it into the future operations and fabrics of the org. Don't just think a survey or a one-off training or a one-off conversation is going to do the trick. I think really, really opening up the hood and making changes for the long term is the ideal way to go.
My guest has been Anthony Vaughan. Anthony, it's been such a pleasure having you on. Thanks, sir. I'm glad we did this. A lot of fun.
I appreciate it, Brandon. Thanks a lot.